Hello everybody, today I am driving one of the most famous Mercedes-Benz of all time. This is a 1969 280SL Pagoda. I'll level with all of you. Until I knew I was going to drive this car, all I really knew about the Mercedes-Benz Pagoda was that there was a car made by Mercedes-Benz called the Pagoda, and that's about it. So, I did a little bit of research. I'll now tell you what it is that I found out. Then, Pagoda experts can hop into the comment section, tell me what I've got right or wrong, and whilst I'm driving, I'll also tell you what this gorgeous slice of classic German roadster is like to drive. The genesis of the Pagoda is a most interesting one, and it turns out this car has a really key place in Mercedes history. It replaced essentially two models, the 190SL and the 300SL. The 300 you've almost certainly heard of. That's the gullwing generation that came in both coupe and roadster form. The truth is, that car was never really intended for the road at all. It was very much a racing car of the day, so it was loud, shouty, very fast, yes, but also incredibly expensive. For that reason, they only ever sold a few thousand of them, and that's one reason they're so expensive today. In theory, the 190SL was very much the more economy-orientated version of the same sort of thing, though built on an entirely different platform, but bearing very much a visual resemblance. The fact was, though, even by the standards of the day, that simply wasn't a good enough performer for the money Mercedes were asking. So, they needed something which was a better performer than the 190, but more accessible than the 300. Cue the 230. Yes, I know, I'm driving a 280. We'll get there in a little bit. The engineering behind this car was particularly revolutionary for the time because a few different ideas were had, but in the end the one that won out was the idea of taking essentially the Mercedes sedan of the day, a platform that eventually birthed the S-Class, and shortening it by quite a bit. This produced a three-seater roadster. Yes, that's right, a three-seater. We have the two up the front, and behind me is what I can only really describe as a jump seat, a sideways mounted seat for little kiddies and presumably very, very patient adults that has actually seen some use in this car's lifetime. The original 230 landed in 1963, and the Pagoda name derived from the hardtop that mounted to it, that had the look of, yes, a pagoda. Clearly, Mercedes was still not overly impressed with the performance of that car. It made 150 horsepower, but later they introduced a 2.5-litre version, the 250SL. Eventually, in 1967, the 280SL arrived and very soon became the only model available. This makes 170 horsepower with 177 pound-foot of torque. That's 240 Newton meters. The engine up front is a classic straight-six single overhead cam unit, but does have multi-point fuel injection, which is fairly advanced, I'm sure, for the time. However, it's worth noting that the 300SL a decade earlier actually had direct fuel injection. I believe the first car in history so equipped. These cars were available with a choice of transmissions. A 5-speed manual was available, but unfortunately is a very rare thing. Far more common is this 4-speed automatic, which actually works quite well for a transmission of the time, and 4 speeds in of itself was, I suppose, fairly advanced. Many other cars from this period, and indeed quite a bit later, would have had only a 3-speed auto. Jaguars of the time, for example. The one thing to note is that the gear lever moves exactly the opposite way to how you'd expect. So park is closest towards you, and then you move it further away. There is no drive icon down here. Instead, you move it into the 4th position, and then it will choose whichever gear is correct up to the one you've given it. So 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. This particular car has a very interesting history. It was supplied new in 1969, though we don't really know much about its early days. However, come the early 1990s, and it had been in the possession of a lady for quite some time, who daily drove it and used it essentially as you might a modern day cheap SL from the sort of 2000s or so. This car was then purchased by its current owner, Alex's father, who always wanted one of these since he was a young lad, so in 1993 parted with the princely sum of £13,000 for it. It has never been restored, it has been used. I am proud to say that it is showing 32,000 miles, but that's only because it's been round the clock at least once before. Alex has been in the back of this car as a child, and now as an adult he enjoys driving it too. His father was planning to move it on at one point, but he couldn't bear to see it go, so he offered to invest in it in order to keep the car on the road and in the family. That is a very noble thing. I must say, I absolutely adore the way this car looks, particularly in this stunning shade of signal red. It's absolutely glorious. Easily, to my eyes, one of the prettiest cars, not just from Mercedes, but ever. It has a true elegance about it. I can easily see a Holly-Golightly type driving this down LA in the 1960s and feeling $1 million. Because I do right now. The interior is certainly classic 1960s, though to me it feels in some ways more American than it does German. This is not the Spartan interior you'd find in a Porsche of the time. This is somewhat upmarket with plenty of chrome and things in here. Happily, the car has also been very well behaved in the near 30 years that the family have had it. In fact, the only real major mechanical work it's needed was a gearbox rebuild that happened only a couple of years ago. They have also resisted the temptation to modify or upgrade this car in any way they feel which wouldn't be sympathetic to it. So, many owners choose to fit electronic ignition, and that's often something I wouldn't be opposed to. But they've taken the fairly sensible approach of, if it hasn't broken down yet, there's no point replacing it now. In fact, just about the only thing that really has gone actually wrong with it recently, you may be able to hear, because the speedo cable has disconnected internally. So it currently believes I'm doing somewhere between 40 and 60 mile an hour. I can assure you I'm not. It also thought I was doing 120 earlier, which I can guarantee you I was not. Many American market SLs came fitted with air conditioning, though this one did not. But to be honest, it's pretty warm today, and even so, with the roof down, it's absolutely glorious. Americans have a tendency, even when they buy convertibles, to actually drive them with the roof up a lot, so I can understand why they need air conditioning a little bit more. Visibility is generally very, very good. Of course, with the roof not on, it's exceptional. The roof itself goes up reasonably easy, but of course, you've got to remember, it's a 50-odd-year-old design. It's not going to be click a button, wait, and you're done like it would in a modern car. As you might imagine, the value of these has changed dramatically over time. In the last 10 years, they've become somewhat more appreciated, and at one point, a good example would have been worth more than £100,000. I'm not exactly certain what you get for one today, but I'm told prices aren't as high as they have been in the past. Even so, you bank on spending, say, £70,000 to £80,000 to get a good example. Compared with some other cars from the 1960s, that makes it quite expensive. However, compared with, say, the 280SL, it's a bargain, as those are priced in the millions. This also, like many a car of the time, is one that simply makes you relaxed. Makes a great noise too. In fact, I was shocked the first time that Alex put his foot down. I didn't think it was going to sound anywhere near as good as it did. Listen. That's more classic Aston Martin sound to me than Mercedes. absolutely wondrous. And it has ample shove. The car will get up to motorway speeds, but I am told one of the problems with it is people don't realise it can do that, so they're often a little bit too keen to try and get past you. It also attracts a crowd like very, very few other cars will, and rightly so. Scuttle shake actually isn't even all that terrible. It's definitely there, you can notice it, but I think that's helped by the fact this car has fairly skinny, tall tyres. Incidentally, they are the same size as you'd now find on a van, so they're actually quite cheap and easy to get. Most parts are also still fairly easy to come by, though in the last few years, as the value of the cars has gone up, so has the cost of the maintenance. Jobs that used to cost only a few £1,000s now cost 10, and that is a shame, because it means for those who've had these cars for a long time, maintaining them is getting just that little bit trickier. There is only the one wing mirror, I suppose I should call it a door mirror, because it is mounted down here on the door, and it's not particularly useful, but it's there. The view out the front is absolutely sensational, love it. A nice big long bonnet, you feel like a hero. Easy to forget, but this interior was also quite revolutionary because Mercedes rounded everything off. You will not encounter a sharp edge in here. Even the little oddments tray here, which is very odd and looks like a sort of middle school project, but is genuine Mercedes, is rounded off. This is all in the name of safety. The car has crumple zones built into the chassis. It's designed to be a safer car in an era where that really wasn't much of a priority for anybody, except Volvo, maybe Saab. Today, really, Mercedes is a company that I don't really think knows exactly what it's up to. I'm constantly frustrated by just how bad some of their cars are put together and how poorly they look after their customers. And yet still, it is a company that has an aura surrounding it, a mystique. It has a real desirability to it. And that came from cars like this. Oh, I love it. The brakes on this car are somewhat heavily servoed, surprisingly so. The suspension, as you can probably tell, is also quite soft. You tap the brakes and the whole front will try and kiss the ground. It doesn't feel scary to throw it round a bend, though you are aware that its overall dynamic limits are simply not that high. In terms of things like insurance, generally speaking, these are pretty good because they are an old classic. Even though they're valuable, classic insurance is generally pretty good. Regular maintenance is also not that bad, but as I said, more complicated and involved jobs can be a little bit pricey now. To give you one example of things that do go wrong with this car, I've been told not to touch any of the switches here for the heater and the fan on pain of death because they are all broken, they will come apart in my hand, and they're £250 each. So fiddle with this and it'll cost me £1,000. These seats are very comfortable, though typical old school car, there's no side support in them whatsoever. If you try and go around a bend quickly, you will simply slide off the seat. These seat belts, I believe, are a later addition, but actually I quite like, because most old cars, the seat belts are horrid. These are not. So then, what we have here is a beautiful, elegant, very usable Mercedes that is not unbelievably expensive, can be run on a reasonable budget, and has a very important place in Mercedes-Benz history, because this is the car where the SL finally gained its identity. It went from being a thoroughbred, stripped-out race car to a luxurious continent cruiser. As the car went on, more and more luxury features got added. The manual gearbox went from becoming an option to a special order, and Merc realised what their customers wanted. Essentially, a shrunken down S-Class where the roof comes off. And that was a formula that served them very well for the next 50 years. Anyway, there we have it. That's a little drive in a 1969 Mercedes-Benz 280SL Pagoda. What a wonderful car to drive around on a beautifully sunny British afternoon. A huge thank you to Alex for bringing his car out today. As ever, to you for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and even if you have, make sure you've ticked the bell icon so you'll be notified of every new video. And whatever it is, I hope to see you there. Bye bye.